On est heureux de prendre vos questions. Happy to take your questions.
All right, so we'll start with question on the phone. As usual, one question, one follow-up per reporter. Nous allons commencer avec les questions au téléphone, comme à l'habitude, une question de suivi. Opératrice, avons-nous une première question? Opératrice, avons-nous une première question?
Désolé. Please press star 1 if you have a question or comment. Faites étoile 1 pour toute question ou commentaire. Nous n'avons pas de questions pour le moment. No questions at this moment.
Thank you. We'll take questions from the room, David.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming here. Maybe just walk us through what are some of the main changes, temporary changes that we could see when it comes to a pandemic national election?
I think it's really important to recognize Elections Canada is recognized around the world as an organization second to no other in terms of performing its duties, administering an election. What this legislation in essence does is it enables Elections Canada to do a little bit more, thinking in terms of the coronavirus and wanting to ensure that we're voting in a safe environment. And that's the essence of what the legislation does. So it's kind of an add-on for Elections Canada to ensure even that much more of a safe situation dealing with the coronavirus. An example of that would be, the biggest example, right offhand, would be the extension of the number of polling days. So instead of one, traditionally we'd have an election on a Monday. Now it would be a Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Another one would be the extension of the mail-in ballot. One of the things that we witnessed very clearly in the British Columbia election was a huge percentage uptake in the number of people that chose to take the mail-in ballot. So this legislation will assist in providing easier access to the mail-in ballot and the submission of the mail-in ballot. So that's another important aspect. And obviously Canadians are concerned in regards to care home facilities where there's a higher concentration of seniors. The legislation would also enable us to ensure that Elections Canada has a clear ability to be able to have stations identified so that they can go in, set up a voting booth, for example, for a couple of hours in a particular specific facility in order to better accommodate a vote. Steven, did you want to provide your thoughts in French?
Yes. Can you also just provide them in French as well? Yeah. Okay.
Donc, ce projet de loi envisage à toute fin pratique la souplesse dans des circonstances exceptionnelles, donc des pouvoirs exceptionnels, une discrétion exceptionnelle pour le DGE en cas d'élection qui aurait lieu en contexte de pandémie. Les trois grands changements, allonger les heures de votation sur 3 jours, dont une fin de semaine, l'ensemble d'une fin de semaine, donc le samedi et le dimanche, en plus du lundi, des 12 heures du lundi. De 2, fournir au DGE la possibilité ou la capacité de créer de nouveaux bureaux de scrutin à l'intérieur même des CHSLD ou des milieux de vie pour des personnes soit atteintes ou qui sont protégées de la pandémie. Et troisièmement, afin d'allonger la possibilité de votation par la poste. Donc, rendre plus facile, plus souple les règles sans pour autant diminuer la possibilité de fraude. Sans pour autant, augmenter la capacité pour la fraude. Élections Canada, nous savons, est à l'avant-garde mondiale en matière de conduite et de gestion électorale et nous sommes évidemment, ils ont notre pleine confiance et ces règles-là fournissent, selon les recommandations du DGE, les pouvoirs de faire une élection sécuritaire en contexte de pandémie.
Okay, I just have a quick follow-up here. So you spoke about mail-in voting. You spoke about how in previous elections that we've seen so far during the pandemic that there has been significant increase in that. Can you tell us how many votes you're expecting to see via mail-in? How much are you expecting to see this increase? And how soon do you need this legislation to pass so that these temporary changes could be in? Like, can you give us a timeline of when you would like to see this go through the House of Commons, go through the Senate, and go to royal assent?
On both points, in regards to the uptake, what number we're looking at, I believe Elections Canada is predicting somewhere in the neighborhood of about 5 million people could be expected in terms of requesting the mail-in ballot. And as I say, the way in which the legislation operates, it'll make it easier for Canadians to receive that ballot, and it provides them options in terms of how it is that they can ensure that their vote is counted. So not only could it be dropped through the mail system, but it could also be brought to, for example, an advance poll or going on to election day where there will be a designation for that vote to be received. In regards to the legislation itself, the government has introduced a number of pieces of legislation. We have a very limited time frame. Opposition parties are now aware of the legislation. This is something that's been talked about for a while now already in the Procedures and House Affairs Committee. When we can get it through, we'll get it through. Obviously, it's a priority for the government. But what's most important to recognize is that Elections Canada has been and will continue to be ready for whenever an election might be. That's their mandate. They understand that, and they're fully capable. They will work with healthcare experts to ensure that Canadians, when it comes to voting, whether you work for Elections Canada, you're a volunteer, or most importantly, you're a voter, that you're going to be in a safe environment for a vote whenever that vote takes place, whether the legislation ultimately receives its passage or not.
I just wanted to pick up on that about the timelines because, I mean, based from my understanding and from my colleague who was telling me that this wouldn't come into effect until May if it's passed before the end of the month. And even then, if it's not, then you could be looking at the summer. So which means that we don't have these in effect until sometime well into 2021. I'm just curious then about how much vaccinations and the vaccination timeline that your government has laid out, how much that maybe plays into some of the thinking you have on this bill. But at the same time, how important it is maybe to try to get this bill passed as quickly as possible so that we're not waiting until next summer for these provisions to jump in.
I think it's important to recognize that the Prime Minister himself has been very clear. We will continue to be focused on fighting the pandemic and ensuring that Canadians get the vaccine. That's where our priorities are. And we're looking for collaboration from opposition parties, whether it's dealing with the vaccine distribution, whether it's dealing with legislation. And when we get the opportunity to pass the legislation, we are happy to get that legislation passed. There is obviously a need. It would be nice to have it passed if there is some sort of an election in the near future, but that's not what we're focused on. What we're focused on is doing what we need to do in regards to the pandemic, and whenever that election's there, Elections Canada will be ready.
And I guess just lastly, which is the cost, because if you're talking about expanding certain things, and obviously there's going to be a need to provide PPE to frontline elections workers, especially if they're going into long-term care facilities. Is there a dollar figure tied to this bill, or is that something that your government doesn't foresee the need at the moment, that Elections Canada doesn't need additional funds to cover an election or to run an election during a pandemic?
The expectation of Elections Canada is to take the actions that are necessary in order to ensure that it's done in a safe environment. And obviously, there could be some cost to that. And those costs would, in fact, be covered.
Let me check once more if French.
Donc, pour les fins des opérations d'Élections Canada, nous laissons évidemment le soin au DGE de prendre les dispositions nécessaires et de surcroît en période électorale, en contexte de pandémie, nous nous attendrions à ce que le DGE prenne toutes les mesures nécessaires afin de fournir l'équipement de protection individuelle, assurer la distanciation, examiner les lieux de votation et ainsi de suite pour assurer un vote sécure, et les ressources, bien sûr, seront là.
And I'll check once more if we have questions on the phone. Operator.
We have a question from Cormac McSweeney from City News. Please go ahead. Your line is now open. Votre ligne est ouverte.
Yeah, my question is for Mr. Lamoureux in your role as Parliamentary Secretary to Leader of the Government in the House of Commons. It's a question on the UK trade agreement. I know that there has been a bill put before the House of Commons, but there is serious concern from the UK government that it won't be passed in time for when the Brexit trade deal is up on January 1st, and that could lead to tariffs between Canada and Britain. They're our third largest trading partner. So what is the status of ratifying that holdover agreement with the UK in the House of Commons? And is there any possibility that it'll be approved before the House rises tomorrow?
I think that Minister Eng has been very proactively following what's taking place here on the floor of the House of Commons, knows in terms of what needs to get done, and there are discussions that are taking place between both the UK and Canada through the different ministries. It'd probably be a question better posed to her as opposed to me at this time.
Is there any possibility at all that the House could return to pass such a bill, because it needs to be ratified in Parliament before it can come into effect?
I think that there are some intermeasures that are being considered, and if there's a need, it's beyond my pay grade at this point in time to be able to say, and that's why I would suggest maybe talking to the government House Leader or Minister Eng, as I'm sure that the two of them are in dialogue.
Operator, do we have another question?
Please press star one if you have a question or comment. No further question registered at this time.
Well, the last question is going to be in the room. David?
Yeah, you just said 5 million people are expected to use mail-in ballots. So when we're going to find out the results, when we're going to know who's going to form government? Is it going to be like the U.S. election, where it's going to take several days to find out who's going to form government? Who's going to be in the opposition?
It's a good question. At the end of the day, I think that we have to have trust and faith in Elections Canada and doing things in a timely fashion. I suspect that for a good number of the ridings, it'll be fairly clear. If I can recall, in terms of what happened in the province of British Columbia, and even to a certain degree in Saskatchewan, where there were close ridings and large numbers, it might take an extra day or two. But that's probably a good question for Elections Canada right offhand. But there's no doubt in my mind, what's most important here is that we got to ensure that Canadians from coast to coast to coast have the opportunity to exercise their franchise. We want Canadians to be voting. We want them to be voting in a safe environment.
So you're preparing for the eventuality as an MP who will be standing for re-election, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
That maybe in your own riding and some other ridings, including yours, Mr. MacKinnon, you might not know the results on Monday night, going into Tuesday morning. That could be a reality with these changes, allowing people to vote in all these different ways.
As a candidate, and I've been a candidate probably now, I guess, maybe 10 elections, both provincially and federally, and it's going to change. The COVID-19 or the coronavirus pandemic, whatever you want to reference it, will change things. It'll change the way in which candidates campaign. There's going to be a lot more Zooming, for example. You've got to understand and appreciate that it's also going to change things with Elections Canada. And one of those changes will be the uptake in terms of the mail-in ballots. How they're able to count them and how quickly they're going to be able to count them. Well, a lot will be determined in terms of where they're coming in from, the actual numbers, the amount of staff. In close ridings, I suspect that they might have to wait an additional 24 hours. Again, it's probably something that might be best addressed to Elections Canada. I would expect in close counts that it might take an extra day.
This is all the time we have. Thank you.